old City Hall was a firehouse too. There were 3 bays at that time. And when a fire was called in to the telephone company, they would turn the siren on, and businessmen would come from everywhere to get in their outfits, their hats, helmets, and everything, and then go fight the fire wherever it was. And most of them were field fires or woods fires back in those days. Sometimes they would go, there was no ambulance in Manassas. They had what I call a carryall, which is like a sedan. And if it was an automobile accident and had a personal injury, that's what they would use for that. The only thing resembling an ambulance was the Baker Funeral Home hearse. And Mr. Baker was good about helping out where he could with that.
My whole life, Dad was devoted to serving the city. He was a fireman, volunteer fireman. That's why I am a good backer up of automobiles, because he always backed in his driveway. Because if the fire siren went off, he wanted, and I had to always back in. So I'm a champion backer upper. And the fire siren was right on the corner, on the telephone pole right out there. There were sirens all over town. And when the fire siren went off, when I was growing up, all the firemen would jump. Warren Hinson, who was his best friend, was a fireman, and they'd all, and during times when it was high fire risk and so forth, he would have his boots at the top of the steps. Wow. So if that thing went off in the middle of the night, he'd have his boots on when he came down the steps to get right to the car. And of course there wasn't a rescue squad, so they did the rescue squad stuff too back in the early days. And one of the reasons he had a station wagon, he hauled people in the station wagon and bodies from various accidents and so forth.
It's a small town in Manassas. There was a spirit of volunteering.
Oh yeah.
Centered around the fire company, the volunteers. If you look back, I think a lot of the people who served as council members came up out of the fire. And so they had that sort of community spirit.
Yeah.
And those people, I always thought it was a neat thing that the council met in above, originally, that old fire station.
Yeah.
And I said, this is really where it all got started, and where sort of that spirit was. And you knew City Hall was right next door.
Well, then there was the fire company too.
Mm-hmm.
That was a close-knit group of men, and they
All volunteer.
had all volunteers, and they partied, had their parties too. My mother was a member of that. My dad was a fireman. My husband, my brother, my brother-in-law, her husband.
Well, he was at the Lake Jackson Volunteer Fire Department. We were out of town a few miles. But he was the chief of the fire department there for about 2 years.
Oh my God.
They all worked together, the fire departments, and
Yeah, there was a whistle that's on the top of the City Hall, old City Hall building, and that was how they got called to fires, and that whistle went off.
everybody left work and went.
It went off when we were getting married in the church. I didn't really, at the time, wondered if it was a joke, that they were giving Ricky one last chance to escape, but it was not a joke, so. But, yeah, a lot of them left.
I was a member of the volunteer fire department, and there was a fire out at the Manassas Shopping Center next to his Magna Box store. And I was relatively new in the fire department and got on the truck, ran out to the shopping center, putting the gear on, face mask, getting the hose, and here's Stuart standing outside of the store next door to his. And as we walked up with the hose, he grabbed us and said, "Get in there!" Oh, no. I'll never forget that. Get in there!
Yeah, like, okay.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of dedicated people you had back then. And they're all either firemen or ex-firemen. The fire department was a big deal back then. Everything circled around that.
Yeah.
When that alarm go off,
Man.
if you're standing in City Hall, I think it's, remember that?
Yes, I do.
And your dad used to run.
I remember running across the street many times from NIFCO to the fire department to run calls during the day particularly.
There's a council meeting going on that night. Your dad had called it and said, no, we're all going out there.
Wouldn't doubt it a bit.
And the whole community just came together and like rallied, and she said it turned into like a big picnic because people were starting to sell coats and sandwiches, but everybody came together. And I told her that's the Manassas that we know and love. That's the feeling you want, that people come to your rescue wherever, what's going on, we help each other.